All right, guys. Thank you all for joining us today. We've got a great panel here. My name is David Sledge. I'm the former head of cybersecurity and compliance for Avelo Airlines. Cybersecurity investor at this point. Kick it off, John. John, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm John Barrow. I'm the CISO at JB Poindexter & Company. We're a large manufacturing company. Just a quick Cliff Note version of my background. I was in the intelligence community for about 10 years in DC, transitioned over to cybersecurity, and I've been able to participate and lead highly successful cyber programs in gaming, healthcare, and manufacturing. And excited to be here.
Hi everyone, this is Michael Oberlander. Many of you know me. I originate from Germany, so that is where the accent is from. You can relax. I have been doing cybersecurity since 30 years, 25 years as CISO, former 8-time CISO, multiple industries, multiple companies, Fortune 500s. Currently, I'm a book author. I will do later a book signing today, and I hope that I can share a lot of information today with you all.
Hello, everyone. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Mario.
Okay. Mario Chiok, previous CISO of Schlumberger, and now I am semi-retired and having a lot of fun.
So today we will talk about some of the challenges and risks that we're facing within the enterprise. We want to make this an interactive session, so start thinking of questions and answers, or I will call on you all and make it awkward. So let's kick it off, though. We talked about what some of the challenges are. Not to beat a dead horse here, but with AI, in the beginning, it was something that it was an issue that we needed to address, and to be honest, feels like it's probably been talked about once or twice, but it's also an unavoidable technology that we need to accept and manage and secure. So Mario, I'll start with you. What do you think right now are kind of the primary priorities on getting AI really secured and governance in place?
So AI is not something that you're going to be able to shut off and forget about it. This is something that is going to be there. It's going to be there forever, and you need to find ways to mitigate their existence. So in my opinion, the best way to address or mitigate is to A, have good policies. Secondly, you need to make sure that you have a good way to monitor what people are doing, and maybe, have very good training and awareness. I believe the reason why people may do the wrong thing or may generate additional incidents is because they're not aware. So having a good awareness and training program on AI will be something that should be prioritized, and it should be probably one of the most economical way of mitigating the risk. So
just with a show of hands, with the attendees today, is your organization, have you adopted an enterprise ChatGPT or AI solution?
Copilot.
Whether you want it or not. Well, so with that, I think that brings up the other issue is, the traditional risk of shadow IT, right? It's you can be open and be prepared for it, or you can fight it later. So, Michael, what do you think the biggest risk right now with the shadow IT of not addressing and securing AI is?
I think this is a big risk, to be honest. Not that I want to make people afraid, and it's not fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but it's really a big risk because we as security/IT professionals, in my view, have failed over the decades again and over and over and over again, that we always let the others go first and basically play around with technology, and then we have to clean up the mess. So let's learn from that and do it different this time. So as Mario said, right, we need to know our assets. We need to have an AI bomb where we do AI, where we use it, and develop the policies, develop the frameworks, use the standards. There's already an ISO 42001 standard. There's a NIST AI risk management framework. There is the EU AI Act. There's multiple here in the US, multiple evolving standards. So take care of that, use them, leverage them. And what we need to do as professionals is get ahead, embrace AI, and basically guide the companies. Don't let them play around. Let us play around. Find a sort of playground area, a test lab or something where you can actually show the people how to do it, let them learn, and then from there you develop certain steps forward so that we this time guide this kind of revolution that will come. And Mario is 100% right. It will be here to stay.
So you brought up an interesting point, providing that environment for them to not only see the value in it, but also to provide, those guardrails and get that established up front. How would you recommend kicking something like that off? Because that's a big challenge, right? Is the board knows about it, the executives know about it, they want it, they know it's going to bring value, but they don't know how to secure it. They don't know what the risk is. So do you introduce? You start that topic, that conversation with the risk, or do you start that conversation with the value?
Great question. And I think it is important to start with a value proposition and putting it in the right perspective with the risk. So that you say, look, this is a great opportunity, but we can't let it run the last 30 years. We need to change it this time. Let's own it. Let's move forward with that in the right fashion. So build your policies, build your guardrails using these standards that are already out there, and then guide the company through that instead of just blindly adopting AI and then you have it pop it up everywhere. What we have done over the last 35 years wrong, right? It needs to change.
And you need to monitor, right?
Yes.
What are people doing with AI? And a lot of companies now give you, they tell you this person is going to an AI site, but they don't really tell you what they're doing. You need to make sure you have a tool that will give you prompts, and then you can actually decide, make a risk assessment on the prompt so you can make the right decision.
Yeah, what we did is we formed an AI steering committee, and what we did is our general counsel actually put out a mandate and said until the steering committee is able to kind of wrap their arms around it, and we kind of put some guardrails and policies in place, the mandate was no use of AI. I mean, I'm sure people were doing it without us knowing, but so we created an acceptable use policy for AI that lists all the acceptable uses, the unacceptable uses, and then we also were able, with a secure web gateway solution, be able to block most AI platforms. And the way the process is basically, we have an AI request form, and so any team or department, anyone wanting to request it, they have to provide the business use case, the business justification, the associated costs, potential risks, and then that's sent to the AI steering committee. We review it, and the AI steering committee is made of IT, cyber, compliance, marketing, innovation.
So let me ask you though, because I love that approach to it, but and I won't name any names, but I've had some experience with, as you know, the proactive versus reactive, right? What was the time frame on getting something like that established? Because, general counsel sending out that notice, hey, everybody stop what you're doing. I can appreciate that. But the reality is that you don't have full control over it. So I think to me, it would seem like it'd be important to make sure that you got that in place within a prompt amount of time.
Yeah, and that was the thing, is when we first came up with the idea for the steering committee, on the side with my team, I said, right now we need to figure out if we can be able to block AI, monitor it, get alerting on it. Let's put something in place as soon as we can, because we knew, even though that mandate was sent out, that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, right? And so my team were able to work on it and figure out a way to block a majority of AI platforms. And what was interesting is, once that policy was published to the company and we enforced those controls around AI, we started getting a lot of tickets like, hey, why am I not able to use this anymore? Like, you didn't get your use case approved,
Yeah, go for it, Mike.
Just quickly, I don't know how many of you are LinkedIn users, but I assume almost everyone. You probably have seen it, and if not, then make sure LinkedIn has changed their policies. They have basically opted you in that you are the trainers of their AI solution. I opted out yesterday evening. I only encourage you to do the same, because this is exactly the opposite of what should happen, right? You need to make informed decisions and not the vendors forcing you into that.
Well, and I think it's a great point, because I saw a note about it yesterday, and I haven't had a chance to look into it, but to be honest, we are also, I think, kind of numb at this point, right? I mean, the last week I've gotten data breach letters about my 9 and 12-year-old kids and myself, right? So, but the truth is that's another component of the responsibility of true governance of AI and securing is the responsibility of how you use it, right? So, what do you think I guess, where would you recommend enterprises what are those use cases fall into place while remaining responsible in use for AI? Do you think that's a critical component? As in like the way LinkedIn's using it? Do you need to opt in or should you opt out?
Are you asking me?
Sure.
So I, by principle and by design, am a strong believer that you always make the decision actively. So it should not be opt out. In any technology or any other such use, it should always be opt in, because I am the person that is the authority about my data / my character, my subject, and so forth. I originate from Europe. Of course, I have that mentality. I know about all the details of GDPR. It's similar. There you have to opt in. You can't just force people into providing the data. You have to opt in. The companies have to ask you for allowance that you actually give them the data. And this opt out here is in my view absolutely insane and crazy. Right? It's not the right way to govern.
Yeah, I wish all the state data privacy laws were that way too.
Well,
they're kind of a mix and match.
Yeah. So I was going to ask John, for you. Did you all cover that within the steering committee on the use externally with clients or customers? Or was it more of focus on internal?
It was more focused on internal, but it was, at first when we were brainstorming, like, how are we going to put guardrails on this? Like, we can't. At first, our thought was, well, let's think of all the potential use cases for it, but you're never going to come up with all. They're going to continue, forever. But we flipped it and said, rather than us coming up with the use cases, have the different teams them come up with use cases where they can add value to their processes, right? And then have them present it to us, and then we can, like I said, team by team, department by department, review it and approve it, and allow just those team members to be able to utilize it.
So, and this is a question for anyone, but I heard somebody say the other day that AI governance is really at the core data management and responsible data ownership, right? So, do you think that as you adopt some type of AI governance, do you really need to go back and review your data governance and your data management?
Absolutely.
Did you find that in that process, anything was identified, or that there was a benefit from doing that, or was it more of just kind of a refresh?
As far as the data governance around AI, we're still kind of building that out, to be honest. We have a huge data strategy program that's being stood up right now, and I'm embedded in that committee as well. But yeah, we're still working on defining all that. But yeah, absolutely, I think that's going to have to be refined as things change, as risk and adoption keep expanding, right?
Well, and so I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Like I said, we've all heard many talks on AI. What are the other risks or innovation that you all see out in the forefront or upcoming? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
So by the way, I just published a new book, and of course I write about that. But really, I seriously mean it. What I see as one of the biggest risks, literally at the front door, is the use of quantum computing in the combination with AI. This is the thing that we talk in 10, 20, and 30 years. You will see, I guarantee it.
No, I think that's a good answer. I think that's something that it's not getting as much attention as it should, because you're not seeing it so frequently yet, but you will very soon.
And let me back it up for those that don't know, no offense. The problem is, over the last roughly 30, 35 years, we have used computers, the regular computers, and the compute speed by Moore's law is basically doubling its capacity and speed every, depending on what you believe, 18 months, 15 months, 2 years roundabout. So every 1.5 to 2 years, we have increased the password length, the password sizes, the complexity, and so forth. And that has played out fair. This was making sense. In my book, I give that exact example why. With quantum computing, the threat becomes that these machines can, put this in perspective, regular computers for a 16-character password, full complexity enabled, you need 700 billion years to crack it, right? And with quantum computing and an NSA supercomputer, you can do this in hours or minutes or seconds. This is a threat because that takes away all the security that we had in the last 50 years, right? Think about the privacy, think about the security threats for confidentiality. Coke's formulas or any other things were so far protected with encryption. Now, if the encryption is no longer valid, what do we do then? That's the big threat.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that they've broken encryption that we've considered long time secure. I mean, and again, I think that's part of the.
Yeah. Not only they're broken encryption, but the problem is that if you encrypt something, normally the encryption keys are embedded somewhere, and the bad guys goes after the key, right?
Fair enough.
Well, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to flip it though. You asked what the biggest risk is.
Yeah.
I think with the speed of technology, emerging technology, AI, and quantum computing, and everything else, the human element is at risk, right? Losing that human element to ensure that due diligence is always performed, that human touch is there. That's paramount. I mean, especially with customer service or just security in general, is ensuring that we don't. Obviously, we want to continue to innovate. We want to automate. We want to, leverage these emerging technologies. But I think we really need to be careful to not push out that human element, because that's huge.
Especially for software updates.
that too.
Well, so that I was going to mention that is a little bit of comfort and security within that arena. Is that in my experience, I've seen when that gets out of control, it often corrects itself, right?
Right.
Because you'd like to learn the lesson once and not multiple times, right? So, Mario, what about you? What do you see in the forefront right now?
I believe that people right now are getting very complacent on things. I mean, this is just as bad as people going out to Google, searching for something, and believe everything you see in Google is true. and that is, this is why I believe that education should be top priority in order to mitigate security risk.
No, I love that. That's a big. It's really important to me personally. But I was talking to somebody today, and they brought up a scenario that I think most people in here can relate to, and that is, cybersecurity is traditionally an under-resourced group. You've got more work than you can handle, and less colleagues than you need to do it, right? So how do you maintain that education and that continuous learning when you've got to have your head in the sand at all times just to keep up with your job? And I don't know if there's an answer to it, because I think part of it is you have to be available to do it. But what's important to y'all? Where do you put your focus?
I like to, you need to have a strategy to build a pipeline. And sometimes you cannot do it with your own resources that you have. One of the things that I have done, and it has worked very well in a few places, is create what I call the extended security team, which are people that work in the company. They have a full-time job, but they have a part-time job doing security. And these people can eventually become a full-time cybersecurity professional.
It's a great approach. It's a great approach. I've heard a similar concept as a citizen developer.
Exactly.
Yeah. John, what about you?
I think that you have to schedule it. You have to put it, block out time in your schedule. That's the only one that's going to happen. Their workload is not going to change. I think you just have to, as a team, as a leader, just make sure that their development is key and that they're doing, a few hours a week or whatever it is that makes sense. But it has to be on your calendar, I believe.
So I agree, and I would also say what will help from an awareness perspective, have a deep fake video of your CEO talking to him or herself, right? Just to educate the workforce what the risks are there. That would be one.
I think okay.
Then regular schedule, and also what helps is developing. I have done this for other companies. Develop security champions that are not full-time security experts, but they are in their working groups, whatever it is, software development, infrastructure, operations, analysts, whatever, and then bring them together, educate educate them, give them, so to speak, the advantage of being the first, and then they communicate that further out. So it is concentric rings around this environment, and this is really helpful. And over time, you get them more mature and more sophisticated. And as Mario said, later they become maybe even part of your direct security workforce.
I also preach that cybersecurity is not just the job of the CISO or the IT, the CIO, it's the job of everyone in the company. So you need to make sure that message is passed loud and clear.
So I know whenever I'd have a new hire and we'd put list of priorities, it was always number one was training. Figure out what their interest was and help support that, right? So, several of you have mentioned bringing in a security champion or, utilizing the team. And that made me think of, I have been guilty of this myself, but I've also seen often with cyber, there is there's a gap when it comes to the operational or business side of things. What would you all recommend to strengthen that side of your knowledge and experience within cybersecurity? Where's the benefit to put your time into learning on the business and the operational side?
So I think what you said is true, but it's paramount, at least for the CISO, but I would even say for the majority of the security people, to learn the business. The CISO needs to do that anyway, right? You need to understand where the business makes its money, what the crown jewels are, what the key assets are, what the business processes are. Otherwise, you can't do the job. And similarly, you need to educate your direct reports, and then they should do this, scroll this down further, so that the people get aware what the business does, how the business operates, and then align the business strategy and your security strategy to that business strategy. That's absolutely paramount to be successful.
It makes sense.
Well, I think that's the only way a cyber program can truly be successful, is to make sure not only that you're aligned with the business, but you understand the business, that you build those strong relationships of trust through transparency and consistency and making sure that, it's not IT and the business or cyber and the business, it's the business. Like at a symposium we had back in Chicago, I think you were there, DD, but they mentioned that, and that's a huge deal, because a lot of times I think we're so focused with our blinders on our specific lane and our priorities, but the priority is always going to be the business. And so you have to make sure that we're balancing best practices of cybersecurity with minimizing operational and user experience impact. Like, we have to make sure that it makes sense for the business. I can think of probably 20 things out on the top of my head that I know with my cyber hat on, we need to implement yesterday.
Yeah, right.
But the company's not ready for it, or we need to be a little more methodical through it. And so you got to be thinking through that.
Yeah, you cannot stop the business, right? I have hired security professionals that they don't want to allow things to happen, and the business cannot. If we follow some of the best practices, we can stop the business, right? So,
Right.
Yeah. But I can also tell you I've been in oil and gas most of my life, and there's a lot of ups and downs. And every time that the business was laying off some people, I have brought business people and teach them cybersecurity.
Nice.
And in 2-3 years, they become some of the best cybersecurity professionals.
Now, that's an interesting point. Do you think that that the cause of that is because they have a different perspective from it coming into it, or do you think it's just that?
Well, they have been on the other side, so that means that when you are telling them that you need to do this, they're going to tell you, they look at it from the user experience perspective and the customer perspective, and following them makes a lot of sense, and it actually helps the business.
Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. When I did the CISSP certification, the one thing out of there that has stuck with me, hand and foot over everything else, is that change in mindset of the business. That's what creates the cybersecurity. Like, so if your cybersecurity is disrupting it, then
You might get out of a job.
Right. So without the business, you can't have the cyber. So,
Right.
What would you recommend right now? The focus for continuing education and training. Of course, we're here talking about AI and so on, but again, is there a specific area that you recommend or that you see being of value soon? Mario, I'm start with you.
I think so. Today, myself, I'm taking a lot of AI training, and hopefully soon I will take some certifications. and I don't need a job. I'm just doing it because I think it's the right thing to do, and we need to learn some things. But I also believe that working and helping organizations, ISSA, ISACA, InfraGard, are also another way to learn a lot of new things and help to get some new certifications and even just workshops. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm a big believer we need to show people how to do some of the bad things that there is. And recently I was working with one of the SOC analysts, and they did a project on deepfake. So now we have a deepfake resource in the SOC. So when people come in and do the tour, if they allow you to take the picture, we can do some really nasty stuff. So
Very cool.
I think it's a big eye opener, and I can tell you the first one that was impressed was the CEO of the company, right? Because he said, we can actually play back something and have him say something that he didn't say.
That sounds like that's got to be a really effective tool, because I know in cybersecurity, at least in my experience, one of the big challenges is how do we communicate the business value, right? So nothing is more effective than somebody seeing themselves do something they weren't aware of, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So again, we've talked about several things, but one of those items was expanding your knowledge area and so on. So again, but we also talked about how difficult it is in cybersecurity with the workloads that we have. What do you all recommend as potential opportunities to expand and build those relationships outside of the cyber IT department? Because that's always a big challenge. I mean, how do I connect outside of the business? Because I'm just the IT geek to some of those people, right?
Get out of your office. Like, seriously, go visit the sites.
Yep.
Go, like, whether you're at a hospital or the casino or now in manufacturing, get out there and see what they're doing. Learn how the processes work. Like, hit the concrete. Actually go visit them and get FaceTime with them, and makes a world of difference. To me, if I'm being honest, and I hope I'm not offending anyone, but when I first got into manufacturing, in my mind, because I was new to the industry, I was like, well, that's kind of boring, But it was the complete opposite. Once I actually went physically to the different locations and saw the amazing things they're doing, I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I love this. But plus, when you get that face with a name, like, it's much easier to partner with them. It's much easier for them to know who you are and get to build those strong relationships. So that way it makes your job easier when you want to implement new controls or you have new programs or whatever you're trying to implement. They're like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. He came to our site.
Well, I know I've found personally that I used to have a practice of walking around the office at least twice a day, right? Just for my own benefit, but also for interaction. But we talked about how the human component is so important and how, the user is our biggest risk. And so how do we, and we're asking them, reach out to us. We want you to be part of the security. We want you to be part of the solution. But I think that one of the side benefits from this, would you agree that getting out and making that face-to-face, they're now a lot more comfortable reaching out to you. I mean, and I think that's almost so valuable it's hard to measure.
What if the only time they hear from you or see you is the fear that they did something wrong? Right. That's not good.
Well, so that's actually a good point. Do you all, what's your opinion on, punishment versus reward? Like, do you run phishing tests? I mean, where do you think the most benefit is in that? Or do you think it needs to be a balance?
I think it needs to be a balance. Yeah. I mean, we do run quarterly phishing campaigns, and there's the auto-assign training if they fail and all that. But I think there's a lot more to it. We have, monthly newsletters, we have lunch and learns, we have, some annual required training and other things. But a lot of it's just us, again, just walking around the office and talking to people and letting them know that we're approachable and that we're not just, IT nerds, stuck in an office in a basement somewhere. Like, we're actually people and we know how to communicate,
That makes sense. Michael, you had mentioned European GDPR. And, we don't have something like that in place in the United States. Closest thing we have is the CCPA or CCPR. And, but do you think there is substantial value in an organization targeting compliance with GDPR, the AI standards throughout Europe, or does it make more sense to focus on what exists today or will exist tomorrow here in the US?
Great question. So my honest answer is I think it is beneficial and valuable for US-based companies to actually implement GDPR for multiple reasons. One is it's a really good framework. It's really thought out and done well. Second is over time when your company grows, you probably will sooner or later make business in Europe, and then there's no way out. You must do it anyway. The GDPR regulation and compliance applies globally, so not only in Europe, but if you are a company that does business in Europe, you fall under that law, right? You can't bypass it. I think for the EU AI Act similarly applies. This is not yet as much tested because it's brand new, but I think it goes in the same direction. Generally speaking, and I just generalize here, it is good for your company to pick the broadest and best framework and apply it globally versus having 20 or 30 or 51 different ones. That's not making sense, right? It's just crazy. And I've done this with my teams always before. We pick and choose, we use the best ones, and sometimes when something is not formulated well in one, then we pick it from a different one, ISO or NIST or whatever it is, and then get this consistently across the globe. That helps you most to be fast and really secure.
So it sounds like, too, that would save you time from having to do multiple implementation. Because there's a big core of that it's not necessary if you do it once.
Let me add one thing. I'll let you go in a minute. So this is important, lessons learned. When you do compliance for your company, don't shift the burden on the company. Make your team understand the different regulatory regimes, and let's not run an audit for SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, ISO 27001, and so forth. This is nonsense. You as your team, you need to configure, understand those different standards and compliance regimes that you have to follow. Do your assessment with the company once, and then you translate it and transform the matrices in your own assessment tools, and then you can give that to the regulatory bodies or the assessors. Don't put the burden on the company. With that, if you follow that approach, you significantly improve the appreciation of security and the actually standardization across the company. Sorry.
So what I wanted to say is that for GDPR, it's not just doing business in Europe, but if you have EU nationals working in your company, even if they are outside EU, it still applies to you. So,
no, that's a really good point, and that's something I've always tried to push. Is if we know we may get there today or tomorrow, let's shoot for where we know we need to be, right? Let's just save the time and get there. So one last topic, I'll take up some questions. The industry today, as everybody in here I think would probably agree, you can pick up, I said pick up a newspaper, you can pick up your iPad and read an article on cybersecurity and the employment or industry in general. And what you read and what you actually live, they never tend to match. What do you all find today, right now, that the biggest issue with employment, career development, so on, I guess the biggest miscommunication or translation that's coming out right now? I know a year or two ago it was, cybersecurity's got a 0 unemployment rate or so on, and the reality is you get these new graduates who are spending a year struggling to find even an entry-level job. So do you think that continues to be an issue, or has that expanded to something beyond that? Mario, what about you?
I think it still continues to be an issue. A lot of it has to do because employment agencies and HR departments do not understand what it takes to have a good trained cybersecurity person. Also, I believe that they go around looking they want somebody, a candidate that has everything, but then they don't want to pay them for what they know. So that's another problem.
Entry-level people with the CISSP, right?
Exactly, yeah. And then the last thing is that employers or hiring managers don't really understand what they need, and they just want to, they know that they have to hire a security person, but they don't understand what the risk is or what they're trying to do, and they just don't match properly.
So let me ask you this before we get other people's response. That's a really good issue, or a really good point, because if the hiring manager needs to hire somebody for their expertise, what's the answer then? Where do they go to figure out who they should actually hire? Because I agree with you. I think that's a problem.
I think they need to go to the actual group that needs that resource,
fair.
not necessarily the hiring manager. This is the same thing as, I tell you, I have done a lot of audits, and I don't go out asking the questions to the manager. I go asking the questions to the people doing the job, because they are the people that really know.
No, that makes perfect sense.
But I won't be surprised that today HR managers or hiring managers are going to chat GPT and generating a job description.
No. So I know that's a topic close to your heart, Michael. We talked about it the other day. As AI comes out, this, and I won't even provide the whole real AI disclosure, but I mean, do you see that being an issue right now with hiring and the practices and so on?
You mean AI usage?
Yeah, just
yes,
in general.
Absolutely.
I'm giving you an open door to kind of.
So let me say this, right? So a lot of companies in the US particularly, they are using already AI to do automated filtering of humans, right? If you follow the GDPR regulation, this is illegal, period, right? And this needs to change. Now, I'm not saying I'm against AI. Don't read this wrong. I'm not saying that. It needs to be in the right fashion. We need to have the right controls. But I want to answer the other point, if you'll allow me for
please.
1 minute. I just wanted to make that point. So it's about building the pipeline. So it's very tough to find the true top-notch security experts that you need to do certain things. And there's no way around that. You need the skill set. But this is not being developed over a year or two. So what you need to do is, if you build your org chart, you need to have entry-level roles, analyst roles, and then over time you make people succeed and then flip them from one role to another role so that their horizon brightens and that you can really increase the knowledge and the expertise. And over time, then you have that. The problem is that many of the companies don't give you the necessary funding, the necessary support to do that. So you need to be finding ways to make it work with internships and, right? That's really a challenge.
And I think, Mario, what you mentioned earlier, I think that's another alternative to kind of fill that gap a little bit. Start trying to kind of leverage those other departments and other team members where you can. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, what I would say too is, as a recruiter, I mean, recruiting and hiring is fundamental. I mean, in my point, I would argue that it's more important than career development, because you need the right people. Now, with that being said, if they're hiring someone that has 100% of what's required, they're going to be bored pretty quick, and they're probably not going to stick around. But if you get someone in the 70, 80% threshold where they don't fit every requirement, but there's close and there's actually room for growth, that person would be challenged and probably happier with that position longer.
Do you think that's a big shift, though, in the mentality of approach? Go ahead, Mike.
And let me add one thing. What we said is all true. This is not a contrary statement. This is just an addition. So this goes both ways. The challenge that I have also found is that people coming fresh from university or college, that they think, hey, I can spell the word cybersecurity and now I earn $100,000 or $200,000. This is crazy. This needs to be also understood. If you are the lucky one that gets chosen to become an intern or / security person, you need to be patient and understand this career takes time. This is a long-term commitment, and you will make the money that you have been told about, but not in the first year or second year. This takes some years, right? Just wanted to add.
No, I think that's an important point. I think everybody probably can relate to that a little bit, where, there's a lot of people that came out with a degree even later in life that expected to make a big paycheck afterwards. But, and I think the reality is, it does open up that opportunity to a paycheck at some point. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't change the requirement of having to earn getting to that place, right? So I'm going to open up some questions. Is there any questions anybody have for these esteemed CISOs? Let me ask you all this. In managing the AI, what challenges are you all seeing, if at all, in trying to execute governance right now? Because I know for me personally, what I ran into was, okay, you know what, we're going to talk about this, but everybody's already using ChatGPT. Like how do I even get a wrap around this, right? And what you mentioned about, legal sending out like, hey, okay, that's great, but like you also said, do we really have control? We have to trust them, right? So what challenges are you all facing right now? Anybody like to share?
Microsoft pushing for Copilot.
So, Microsoft, what are you kidding? They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't just roll it out on us. And I think that's an important part to our important topic is how much focus do you put on making sure that your existing applications and SaaS services and so on, that things don't get rolled out. As you know, an automated update can cause problems at times. So, how do you even get a handle on that, or is the reality that you've just kind of gotten to a complacent point and having to put your trust in those companies?
We can kind of balance it where you can still have auto updates, but it doesn't mean you have to implement those auto updates immediately.
There you go.
You can have kind of a grace period and have
Test them out.
exactly test them.
You need to have a staggered environment, right? Like call it, if you want, development, test, and prod, and so forth, staging. So this is all old school. It works, but it was not applied. I mean, globally, 100%. We had so many, which is unbelievable.
Well, I think that's a trap that a lot of enterprises and teams fall into, is that, yeah, great, when you're starting to get this dev environment built out, but are you really leveraging it? Are you really, does your dev match the prod? And I know in 2 of my recent roles,
95% of the time.
that's it. Because what happens is over time, like you said, we need to make this adjustment. So you make it in the prod. And I think you get to a really dangerous place with that. So, so what other issues are you all focusing on?
Do you have a question?
Yes, just
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
there. So DevSecOps, basically, that's the way to go, really, because always companies do not have money to spend the same amount of controlled environment versus dev environment. So having that whole, at least a proper test environment, with a red click of the prod, and having that build, verify, test cycle within the DevSecOps cycle implemented fully, you have avoided cost like savage.
Yeah.
So coming to the AI, right? The biggest problem I see working with my clients, my name is Anna, I work with a lot of clients. The recent plunge is the AI. I did a recent project with a company called Innovate Carefully. They're trying to do the drug data to estimate or predict the go-to-market time frame for a drug, because they know the drug works, but they don't know when it will come to the market because there are trials, clinical trials, and others. Obviously, they couldn't match up with the training data, so they asked us to come and do the GPUs. So we did the Azure GPUs. We did remodel them. The biggest problem is data poisoning. If they don't clean up the data garbage in garbage, that's the biggest request. And people blindly think all data is valuable. Oh, we have all this data. We bought all this data from these 10 different healthcare systems. Oh, it's all valuable. No, it's not valuable. If you put all the garbage is. So investing the human touch that we are talking about, having the right humans do the due diligence and clean up and segregate data before we train your LLMs and models is going to be super critical. And that goes with if a human is involved, there's value. There is everywhere, there is good, there is bad, just hidden right behind. So people intentionally to really doing the data, poison the data. So having those policies, having the right diligence, and the whole, you can't have keys to the kingdom. One cannot have all keys to the kingdom, right? So obviously, having the shared responsibility, having 2 or 3 people review it, so that's the biggest challenge.
That accountability, that's important.
So for the attack vector, so poisoning is one, right? Model evasion is another one, and prompt injection is another one. There's 5 major attack vectors that need to be addressed.
To keep using it every, that's one big challenge.
But I wanted to say one more thing about the DevSecOps. So can we please call it SecDevOps, because we want to shift it left on security from day one.
How about that? No, listen. So
We don't have it. The developers will come and say, hello, we take security serious. They get offended. No, DevSecOps.
Well, you hit a point pretty close to my heart, though, that, I always say if you don't need it, don't collect it, right? Yeah. But traditionally, there's always a value placed on data, and it's always a positive value. It's 0 and above.
It's not always.
Well, not always, but I think that there needs to be a change in approach and maybe put a negative or a risk value on that data as well. If we're not using this and we're collecting it, is it, are we accepting risk with it, right? So, although I'm not real hopeful on getting that adopted today.
We don't know what we don't know. There could be some bomb that's
100%.
Bring down. So it's important, and that's what I say. Will AI ever replace human beings? I always tell people, no. It will only increase it, because if there is no human, in the earlier meeting, I heard somebody saying, you're the common sense around the AI.
On the positive end, yeah.
And in the intelligence, artificial intelligence with no common sense. So humans are common sense. Without that, I think there is no value to it.
Sure. Well, and I'll wrap this up. I want to say. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear. Ann, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make a comment. There was some very good research done about AI using general data availability. So you have data in the universe.
Right.
AI is taking from that and interpreting much faster than a human can and spitting out an answer, and its answer goes back into the data universe. And so what you have is an automatic data poisoning.
Got a loop.
So the garbage data going back out. And over time, as this research went through this, they said it reduces the viability and the trust in the data down to like 75% of these garbage.
Wow.
You have to understand that from this perspective that when you ask an AI a question, the way you frame your question often selects how the answer is going to be.
Sure.
So I can ask 3 or 4 different ways and get 40 different perspectives on the answer. And at the same time, everything I get goes back into that data universe. And you have to show that to people when they're trying to play with AI and think it's great. You need to show them the differences in the kind of answers they get so that they understand humanly not to trust everything that comes from it.
That's great.
I will answer to that slightly. There is a big assumption and myth about AI that everything we tell the ChatGPT, it is a listening and learning. It is not.
Well, but I think it's also fair to say if it's not, my phone is, right? So, I mean, somebody's listening. Yeah, right. So, and I promise this data is getting sold to the organizations using that learning, right? So, it's all a cycle. But that was a great point because I hadn't really thought of that. But I think it's a powerful way to communicate. You know, that you have to really put some caution and understanding into this.
You can demonstrate that to your users. I love ChatGPT.
Right.
You can demonstrate a condition or a set of questions and show them how variable the answers can be and no complex. It's very good.
That's good.
I'll tell you an easier example. You go to the ChatGPT right now and ask the same question 4 times. I guarantee you'll get 4 different answers.
So, you know, and I remember when it first came out, a friend of mine, his attorney, he did that. He said something about what is closer to the ocean, Dallas or San Antonio or something like that. And every time it was something different, and it was never correct. So I saw another question back. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then I guess AI making this more in the everything part of the cloud, but obviously like the role of the CISO is increasing in power and budget and influencing the technology organization. Like, how do you navigate that specifically with CIO, especially in situations where you're maybe stepping in and obviously the lack of security has led to some.
That's a really sensitive area that can either be a huge benefit, right? I mean, that can be what fuels your entire success, or it can be the absolute unavoidable, unpassable roadblock, right? I mean, would you all agree that, you know, that's a pretty important relationship?
I think it's the absolute important relationship. And I wrote in my book, I said, look, this is in tandem. This is not the CISO against the CIO or vice versa. It's basically in tandem. You need to have a partnership, a true partnership, and build this relationship. And similarly with other C-suite members, but the CIO, and maybe some companies have it as a CTO, that kind of relationship is absolutely paramount. It needs to be a partnership and even leveled.
I saw somebody had one more question back there. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. My name is as CISO, what's your strategy to go and ask for more budget from the
I'll let you know once I'm successful. Go ahead, guys. John, how do you approach that?
Clear English. Make sure you explain things that are clearly to someone that doesn't understand.
You say English, but is it more
Clear communication.
CEO?
Yeah, exactly. Like 1,000-foot, you know, super high level, and you need to be really creative on the ways that you're presenting data and metrics, because what may be compelling to you is Chinese or completely foreign to them. And so I think it's really important that you understand what level they're at, what makes sense to them, what they care about, again, that business alignment, and make sure that the points you use to justify that budget increase or that them to invest in it is tied to things that they actually care about and that you can clearly point to. It can't be theoretical or whatever. It has to be, at least from my experience, it has to be hard numbers, things that are tangible, that are easy to understand. Yeah, that's actually absolutely part of it. I mean, I think with budgets, I think with a program in general, you need to constantly balance, hey, look at all these amazing things that we're doing, but also we're not good. We still have these gaps. We're still being, getting attempted attacks. We still have threats, so you have to kind of balance that conversation.
And I would like to add, the importance piece is that you as the security leader are not waiting on the other departments to get their stuff done, and then you are coming at the latest moment to the Gen piggyback. You need to be partnering with them from the get-go. You need to help drive the initiatives. And then when the case is presented to the board or to the whatever decision-making body, you say, look, if you want to do that, the security is paramount to do so that we can stay and remain in business in the right way with privacy controls, security controls, AI governance, and so forth. So becoming part of that first business case is very, very important to help get this point across.
Well, in that business case too, I think it's important to mention, kind of combine what both of you just said, is that, oftentimes we come to these kind of things and we hear people's perspectives for their organization, but not everybody, has a the employee count to have a steering committee and so on, right? So, but I think that's where it falls back into what you said, John, about figuring out their language. And no matter who it is, the size of the company, I think that's where it's critical. Would you agree with that, Mario?
Yes. So I would like to say that my strategy is to educate them first and then wait for the right opportunity, because I am the kind of person that never wastes an opportunity. Because when something happens to somebody else, hopefully, you're going to be able to leverage that for yourself.
So, and I'll wrap it up.
Exactly.
I'll wrap it up with that. And I just wanted to make one comment. We talked about, some of the challenges and some of the resources and whatnot for success and career and so on. I just want to point out the value of I came to cyber because of the individuals in this community, the support, the moderation, all of it. And see, all of these guys on this panel, including myself, reach out to us on LinkedIn. You won't find anybody involved here that isn't eager to help you or be supportive in some way. But just to highlight the importance of that, with the CrowdStrike outage, I have a Slack channel with some other CISOs, and I got a notification about 2 a.m. that morning and giving me a heads up on it. I was able to communicate that out to a number of our bases that every other airline at those bases had disruption the entire day. We had zero disruption. So again, I want to say that this is a challenging industry to be in, but we're all here for a reason. And I just want to kind of highlight the importance of that network and leveraging those around you. You're never going to lose from that. So thank you, guys.
2 years ago, I used to call that the friends and family ISAC.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I love it. Thank y'all very much.